So my name's Nagasuri, and I've been around for so long, I just said I didn't really feel I needed to be introduced. But of course, there are people here who've never seen me before. So I'm Nagasuri. I've been ordained for 22 years. I found Sri Ratna in the late 80s when it was known as the Western Buddhist Order, or Friends of. And I just love the Dharma. My name means, and be careful, literally serpent, demon, heroine. But the preceptor, the person who gave me this name, said that she translated it, and I could offer the translation of she who aspires to be a heroine of wisdom. Shuri means heroine, so that's there. And the Nagas in both Hindu mythology and Buddhist mythology kept the perfection of wisdom texts. And so that's how she was happy to have it translated. And I just love the Dharma. I've been a teacher, and it almost feels like a past life. But so yes, being able to offer the Dharma is something that I really enjoy doing. And so this morning I'm going to talk about the 4 sides. And my reason for choosing this, when we were deciding what our next group of talks would be about, and we thought, well, just stories from the Buddhist tradition. And I thought of this, and it was partly because I've never been to a talk on it. I've never read a lecture on it. And I just thought, I love the story. And I just thought, well, this will be a chance to do it. And I went online, and I knew Padmavajra had given a talk, a very senior order member within Sri Ratna, the order and community we all belong to. And I couldn't find it. He's given so many talks, and I put in 4 reminders and, etc. No, sorry, 4 sites, etc. And it didn't come up, and it didn't come up. And I was thinking, oh, well. And so then I just put 4 reminders in the Google search, and a wonderful, just a 10-minute talk from Vishvapani came up. And Vishvapani is another very senior order member, a man. And he lives in London, and he's frequently called upon by the BBC to give the thought of the day. And the BBC, of course, being very multicultural, asks Christians and Buddhists and Hindu people and Muslims and Jewish people, different people to come and do that. And Vishvapani's given some stunning ones. And in, when was it? In May 2020, Vishvapani was asked, and of course, COVID was just really, spreading so fast by then. In Europe, there'd been the shocking cases in northern Italy, and it was, just moving into England at a very rapid rate. And he talked about COVID and the 4 sides. And I don't want to go into that immediately, but it gave me enough, knowing that, just 20 minutes and then a discussion, that, yes, I felt very willing just to plunge in with that. So I just want to start. So there are very scant details about the 4 sites in the earliest sources. So it's not that in any way it's canonical. It's not part of, I don't know what to call it, orthodoxy or something. But there are very many legendary versions of it. And it's a great Dharma teaching. So, that's why it's worth looking at it. And I'm going to give you the background. So the Buddha is born, and, and his mother dies soon afterwards, but his stepmother appears, and so he's suckled and he grows. And a great wise rishi, a great sage, comes out of the mountains. This is in northern India, as we would call it today. And he makes this prophecy that this child will become a universal monarch or a universal religious teacher. And I always wonder, I'm elaborating the story even more. He's going to become a Buddha. And the king, or the father, a great chieftain, a king, is very clear which one that he thinks his son should become, and that, of course, is a universal monarch. So the story goes that Siddhartha Gautama, as he was called, lived in luxury. There was a summer palace and a winter palace. And as he grew up, he was taught archery and all the right skills for, a monarch and things like that. He was a great horse rider, etc., etc. And he's kept very cosseted. And by this time of the story, he has a wife and a son. But he decides to go out of the palace grounds. And, you even suggested that he never went outside the palace grounds until he was in his 20s. We can take it all on whatever level we like to. But he gets his charioteer to take him out. And in these 4 episodes outside the palace grounds, he sees firstly a sick person. And he says to his charioteer, what's wrong with this person? They're obviously feverish, they're very unwell, they may be lying on a bed or whatever. And the charioteer says, well, we're all subject to sickness, and that can happen to us. They go back to the palace. And the second time they go out, Siddhartha Gautama sees an old person creeping along the road with a stick and perhaps not seeing too well, etc. And again, he says to the charioteer, what's this? And the charioteer says, well, if you don't die young, if you don't get sick young, you might live for a very long time, but you will age. And, this is aging. And Buddha sort of swallows, and back to the palace grounds they go. And the third time they go out, he actually sees a corpse wrapped, as they are still today. Often you see in certain parts of India, being taken to the ghats, to the burning grounds. And again, he says, what is this? And the charioteer here says, well, this is death. This is what all human beings, all living beings, I don't know that he said all living beings, but I can elaborate endlessly. This is what happens. Now, if you don't die young, you certainly will die old. And the Buddha is shattered. Perhaps he had seen these things earlier. You can just, wonder. But he's been cosseted. Everything has been done to keep those particular sites as anaesthetized as possible or whatever. But this time he really has deeply seen the inescapable truth of the human condition, that old age, sickness and death are part of our human nature. And he goes out once more and he sees a wandering holy man. So these, you still today see wandering holy people in India. And this person will be in sort of fairly ragged clothes and will be, begging for his sustenance and will just sleep under a tree or whatever. And this person obviously had left behind the illusory security of conventional society. And that was a terminology that Vishvapani used. And I thought that really struck with me. So the illusory security of conventional society. If we don't really face the human condition in terms of old age, sickness and death, we're in an illusion. We think you have a security that, my goodness, we don't. And having seen that, he goes back to the palace grounds and, who knows how quickly, and decided to leave home, that he was going to commit himself to the spiritual quest, to this sort of wandering mendicant lifestyle. And that meant, of course, he left a wife and a son. And as I actually taught feminist studies at university before I became a practicing Buddhist, and a bit of a swallow there, but I'm not going to go down that route, but very different. I mean, leaves a wife and son who are absolutely supported, who, that the wife, of course, has the loss of her husband, the son has the loss of her father, but he does return as an enlightened being, but he's doing it for the sake of all humanity. And, there's that side. And I was thinking about it for myself, and I think I went looking for meditation and stress management in the late 80s and founded the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order. And I think what I found most attractive, very friendly, very welcoming, but there were two women there. One was an order woman and one was training for ordination. Both of them were bringing up children on their own. And I, at the stage, was divorced and with my divorced husband, bringing up a son. And they had something that I wanted. I can say there was a good deal of grasping there, but I thought there's a serenity about them. There's an acceptance and a calm that I just found enormously attractive. So having said that, I want to leap into COVID-19. And I think with COVID-19, we were all, of course, in different ways, confronted with sickness, death, and the vulnerability of old age. I think in some ways, you know, what happened in particular old age facilities here in Australia, but elsewhere, you know, in the first world, was just so deeply shocking and concerning. So there we were faced absolutely with impermanence and uncertainty. I mean, suddenly, you know, I'm somebody who has things planned out, and I'll do this month, and next year I'll do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And suddenly all those things just had to be held lightly. You know, I could have the plans, but never hold them so tightly that I'm deeply disappointed when, you know, it all falls apart. And Chittamaya and I did miss out on a Bangara dance thing. We were going, you know, we had the tickets and everything, and then suddenly, nobody was allowed, you know, that they weren't performing, but we weren't allowed out of home anyway. You know, a very small thing. I mean, for some people, of course, it was much, much bigger. So what I want to sort of ask is, how quickly or deeply did we or do we respond to COVID-19? Because indeed, you know, here we all are without masks on, and we can chant and all those wonderful things. But we probably all know there's another variant creeping into Australia, and it's around and about. And so how does that affect you? I mean, for me, I go and visit my sister-in-law. I mean, I was divorced, but I still, you know, that's who she is in my life. And she's in an aged care facility, a very well-run one. But every time I go, I have to do a rat test there and wait for it to come through before I can go and visit her. And it's a very good reminder. And I do try always to wear a mask when I'm in the supermarket. I've had as many vaccinations as I'm eligible for. But I just sort of feel, well, there must be a bug out there somewhere, COVID-19 bug out with my name on it. And, you know, but I've done what I can to do it. So how quickly or deeply, you know, did we respond? Or do we respond to sickness? And, you know, certainly for COVID-19, I was very willing to be vaccinated as soon as those were available to us. But I mean, I recognize, you know, if I have to go to the doctor, and I'm not one that goes at the drop of a hat, but I'm feeling so unwell that I go to the doctor, I expect the doctor to know what to do, and there will be this wonderful magic pill, or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, that will be that. And I assume that, you know, we live in such lucky conditions that for most of us, that's probably a similar response. And I suppose I expect to be healthy. I've had an enormously fortunate life in terms of health, but now in my older age, you know, I'm not as reliable as I used to be. And I can be quite cranky when I have to actually say to someone, I'm awfully sorry, I promised to do that, but, you know, I can't do it. Something's hit me and I can't do it. And so I think I know I've taken my good health for granted for many, many years of my life, decades of my life. And that's very lucky, but it's, you know, it may not have been that way. And then, of course, there's old age. And I just want to talk about that in terms of how, you know, so often in the West, in Australia and elsewhere, the aged go into aged care facilities. And I'm not questioning that. My sister-in-law's there. She had nobody to look after her. She has advanced Parkinson's. You know, it's wonderful that these places are there, but we also, I think, know that many times old aged people are put in care homes and then not visited. My sister-in-law, she's visited by her brother, and her other brother is dead, who was my husband, has died. And my son gets to visit her. So one of her nephews gets to visit her, but he lives right up on the north coast, so in the central coast. So his visits are very intermittent. And, you know, that strikes me as really very tough. So yes, how we do that. And then in terms of death, of course, you know, many of us are well into our adult years before they've witnessed a dead person or been with somebody dying. And we, again, sanitize death in the West so often. And, you know, funerals, there's a closed coffin and things like that. And it's almost as if we'd rather not, you know, consider death. And, you know, I have a great friend who works in intensive care, and she says the number of families that will come in, and it's a very aged person in their 80s or 90s, and they want every intervention that's available. And the doctors will say, well, you know, there's this and there's that, and try to be as even-handed as possible. And the, you know, the family just can't face that this is old age and death. And they have these interventions, which of course can be very intrusive and may not be what, you know, what the individual, him or herself or themselves, you know, wants. And yeah, and so, I mean, I think for us all, it's really important, and at any age, not just because I'm so old, but, you know, my son has my power of attorney, and he also has, I forget what it is, but it's like a living will. He knows I don't want any, you know, drastic intervention, that, you know, I just want to go as peacefully and unintruded upon as possible. And I think it's really very important to have that in place if that's what you want. I mean, it's not what you want, then of course that's fine. But if you're clear about that, then make sure you do it. So I just want to ask, did we turn to the Dharma during COVID-19, or are we turning to the Dharma? Do we see praticca samutpada? Do we see conditioned co-production? That these things all come into being from an absolute myriad of causes and conditions, and there's no one to blame, and, you know, we've just got to face it. It's no one's fault. Although, of course, there is the question of lifestyle. You know, have we been looking after ourselves? And of course, for me, it was the question of climate change as well. We're not going to go down that path. But basically, things have come to this position, and, you know, so many people came down with COVID, and sadly, so many have died. So, you know, I feel it's imperative to practice the Dharma and to be aware of the preciousness and fragility of human life, our own as well as all others. And I also want to suggest that in our own small ways, we can be a fourth sight for others. And by that I mean just the lives we lead can be a symbol or a suggestion to somebody else. And I'll give you a wonderful example that I became aware of last Thursday. A woman who's very recently became a mitra and made an enormous lifestyle, had been in the corporate world, high up in the corporate world, traveled overseas, etc., etc., etc. And she stepped out, and she's no longer employed. Her health is not good, but she's found the Dharma. And very recently, a very long-term non-Sangha friend of hers got in touch with her, and this friend she's known, she says, for at least 20 years. They were in the corporate world together, and sadly he's become addicted to ice in the last 5 years. And he's gone to NA, and you know, he can sort of stay clean for 3 or 4 days, perhaps a week, but he's never been able to hold it in. And he got in touch with this friend of mine and his good friend, because he knew that she had just made this extraordinary change, and he wanted to ask her about the Dharma. And she was able to say, well, we've got a recovery retreat coming up in early December. She didn't know that we have a Friday night recovery session. And when I said that to her, she said, oh, I'll get back to him immediately and say any Friday night here at 6:30, there is a recovery session that looks particularly at the 11th step within the AANA or whatever A program it is. So, you know, she has been a fourth sight in that way. I hope that's intelligible to you. Yeah, so just think of that. As your life changes, you can be a fourth sight. So I won't say any more, but I have 2 questions. And I did send them out, but very recently. So the first question is, have you experienced seeing someone who is eminently calm, wise, and kind, and been inspired to follow their example? So there may be somebody in your life that you've had that experience. And the other question is, what did or does COVID-19 confront you with? How are you responding, or how did you respond? So we'll break up here into 2 groups, probably. Manichita, are you happy to? Yeah. So Manichita will be out in the reception area. And if we just get into smaller groups, it's just hard for everybody just to be able to think about those questions and perhaps talk about them a bit.
Where's a cup of tea?
Well, you can't have a cup of tea in here.
Not in here.
No. No, we don't. No. Here's the Naga.
Thanks.